Good day to you. This is Galactic on the 19th day of September, a Thursday as it happens. I'm beginning the LaTeX document, which is the next logical step according to the process of science, in order to voice a new discovery so that consensual science can review it, perhaps tear it to shreds, perhaps accept it, perhaps divided opinion. But as long as nobody else hears about it, it is not science, it's simply my philosophy. That will not do, that is not science, that's not what we're blueprinted to do. We're blueprinted to get solutions. And since I have literally all the solutions now, this must go out. It has nothing to do with what I want or like. So I am not a demonstrative man, I am not an assertive man, but this must go out. Now today, the number system is taught to us in school, so I'll start there. This is a major turning point in science, and you're probably allergic to any conceptualization of such a thing. You've been brainwashed not to accept truth. We begin where we began in school. We were shown the line, and we were told that it is the number line. That is true. So that's where we begin with the number line. The number line is a curious construction of words because the number is not a geometric object, but the line is. So this is a correlation between two completely disparate systems, and the human intellectual system, the human mind, cannot correlate numbers and objects. It's not possible. I'll show you that yes, it is possible, but you have to do it right. We were taught incorrectly in school, and this goes all the way through universities, all the way to the top level of physics. The number system is being inadequately comprehended and inefficiently used. So that will be the result of this short video lecture. It is a lecture. I don't prefer to do lecture format. I'm a very fun-loving man, but this is deadly serious, so I'm going to treat it as if we're machines who have to be reprogrammed, okay? That's what I had to do, so you're going to have to do it too. My job is to make this easy and good. It's not to overwhelm you, daunt you, frustrate you, or make you angry. I'm not here to disturb anything, or to pull down any pillars, or to go ad hominem on men who misrepresent science. I simply state the situation the way it is and proceed to the solution. Without going to the solution, everything you hear on YouTube is anti-science because nobody is looking for a solution. What people are looking for, I don't even want to talk about. People are terrorized. I'll leave it at that and let you mull over it if you feel like it. So the number system begins with a line. We'll be talking about how discoveries were made in the 20th century about the Euclidean line and the number system which we've come to know and love. What good are numbers? Have you ever thought about that? I'm sure you have. You were taught how to think about numbers, so I'm going to show you what the universe actually says we're doing. Because only what the universe says matters. It doesn't make any difference what Cantor says, Riemann, or anybody else who talks about numbers. If they're not telling you what the universe says, they're liars, okay? That's the way it is in science. It's ruthless because we can't afford to be teaching the next generation false information. That's contrary to evolution. And just a footnote, for those of you who know me, you know that I have a vendetta against natural selection. I want to see Darwin tarred and feathered. And I want everybody from Stephen Jay Gould to the present moment to be brought to account that they're filthy, dirty liars of the lowest and most horrendous sort. So natural selection has been disproved by the discovery of DNA.
And you will learn that or you'll never amount to a pile of shit.
But there is such a thing as evolution. There's such a thing as human evolution. You know what it's called? Science. That produces human evolution. It doesn't change the DNA. DNA cannot be changed. Just a shout out to the genetic splicers. You who are trying to dick with the DNA for so-called progress, you'd better get out or you'll lose your goddamn soul. Okay? That's the way it is. DNA cannot be tampered with. If you do, you're defying the universe. So to begin with a number system, you know that the two most significant numbers are 0 and 1. This is never explained correctly, so let's begin with 0 and 1. What is 0? What is 1? Which one do you think is the most logical number to start with? I'll show you that in order to understand either one, either one, yeah, there's a pun, either the 0 or the 1, you have to actually relate them. And that's a concept that has been lost from human education. Geometry is no longer taught. Geometry is vilified because numbers are God. No, they're not. You're going to learn that numbers are merely a tool. Numbers are a tool in service of geometry, and science is not based on numbers, no matter what anyone says. And you will learn that so that you'll know it, and then you'll be able to stand up to these jackass, pompous, pretentious, precocious bullshitters. The numbers are slaves. And if you don't know geometry, you cannot understand numbers. So you have to understand the relationship between 0 and 1. I'm the only man currently on the face of the earth that does understand that, so that's what I'm going to concentrate on right now. So what is 0? I proved in 2022 that 0 is actually the Euclidean zero-dimensional object. So this is pure Euclidean geometry. The 0 that we call a number is the point that Euclid discovered. So the 0 is a point on the line. It's on the line. Memorize that. Here's why. 0 is only a number in relation to another number. And so you have to have an index on the line that's different from 0, or different than 0, I think the English prefer to say. But in either case, different from or different than, what would make a difference between the number 0 and some other number? I know this sounds elementary. You may be getting an itch because you're tired of being subject to tedium that's worthless. That's your educational system that gave you that instinctive response. It's a learned response, but now you can trust me, so I'll tell you the truth. When you go to discover what is a number, you start with the line. That is actually necessary. The universe did teach us that. You do have to start with a line. And this is a success story. So after Euclid defined the point in the first sentence of elements, he then defined the line as an extension of the concept of the point, so that it has length and no other dimension. That is called 1D. Euclid did not use that term. He simply defined what would come to be called 1D, and that's the line. The line and 1D are exactly synonymous. It can be proved, as I did prove, although this was known, I simply formally proved it. Since the line goes to two infinities, you can assign a characteristic of left and right, or what's called polarity. You could say plus minus, that's our convention. So you have plus infinity and minus infinity. These are equivalent, and therefore the line has a center. That was discovered essentially by Archimedes as a principle of deduction. He used that to invent the primitive form of calculus, by the way, so this is monumentally profound. The Archimedean is the balance of the object. We only know of one object at this phase, because this is progressive, and we're going to a higher space in just a moment. But in order to get to a higher space, we have to know what the derivative space implies, and that is the line. Obviously, the line is embedded in a higher space. Nobody has ever directly perceived that. I was forced to directly perceive it, whereby one can establish a mathematic relationship between the infinite line and the infinite enclosing space for that line. That infinite enclosing space is called a sphere. So we're talking about the diameter of a sphere. That is the definition of what a line actually is. It's the diameter of a sphere. It makes no difference that it goes to infinity. We'll be talking about infinity in just a moment. I made a revolutionary new insight into the concept of infinity so that it can now be treated rationally. This changes science at its basis. So this is ultimately profound. I hope you accept it as such and treat it as such. I'm not lying to you, and I'm not making anything up. I got this directly from the universe. That is called science. So now we have a diameter of a circle with an Archimedean center. Because the plus and minus balance to a center, that is the zero for the line. And that is a pseudo number. You can think of it as a number if you wish, but in a moment you'll see that you would be wrong to consider it a number. Zero is not a number. Not in the same sense as everything else on the line. However, zero has a direct relationship to linear infinity. And this has to do with the center and edge concept. The center and edge concept for the line, we have the center and we have the edge. The edge is two polaric points on a sphere. Those are called antipodal, that's a hard word to say. Antipodal points on a sphere are the points of the diameter of a sphere. So we arbitrarily choose one diameter since there are conceivably an infinite number of diameters. Depending on how you rotate that line, that'll become a critical concept in just a moment. We're still dealing with a line though. We have two numbers for the line. We have infinity, which is split to plus and minus. And we have the center, which is the Archimedean of those two infinities. It's also the Archimedean of every pair of points on the line. And now, in order to metricize the line, you need an index. I'm sorry that these are technical terms which you've never heard, but they're fundamental terms that you should have been taught. So the index is a very specific concept, and the metric is a very specific concept. These are never taught correctly. So I'm going to teach you correctly what is the metric of an object and what is the index of the metric. So you have to get the index to get the metric, but you don't even know what an index is unless you're conceptualizing a metric. So what can you do with a line? Distance. Distance. You have to say it correctly, though, if you want to get this straight in your mind. It's linear distance. It's linear distance. It's linear distance. You have to say both words because we're going to a higher space in a moment where distance has a different interpretation. But distance on the line is redundant. The line is nothing except distance. That's what the line metricizes. Well, that's inverted, but the line and distance are the same concept. So the metric of the line is distance. The index of the metrics, you have to choose a lowest number. This is never taught. I'm teaching you correctly. How to metricize the line. You have to establish an index. We have. It's called 1. It's called 1. That's the index. You know what the index is formally defined as? The smallest distance. The smallest distance is 1. And if you don't have that, you don't have a metric for the line. So you have to jump from 0 to 1. That is presently in physics called the quantum jump. But it's incompletely stated. If you state it that way, it would not really make sense. It's the linear quantum jump, and that is correct. The linear quantum jump goes from the pseudo number to the actual number. So the actual number is the index. And from that you get the metric of the line, because then all you have to do is repeat the index as far as you want. That is called linear spatial separation. And now you have to add the word spatial. Build that into your system now. You have to say linear, because it's the line, and you have to say spatial, because that's the domain. This has to do with the fact that Albert Einstein discovered that space is never alone. Space does not exist by itself. Space has the same relationship to another quantity that electroforce has to magnetoforce. This is so incredibly deep that you literally cannot comprehend it. I'm merely telling you where we're going with this. And those of you who are super clever, perhaps super geniuses, may already be figuring out what's happening. We're getting to space-time. Yes, we are. This is the right way to derive space-time. So now we have a line that has a, well, we'll say it's a number, because it's on the line. So 0 is a number because it's on the line, but it's a unique number. It's not like any other number, because it's not indexed. The 0 has no index. It's null. It's nil. It's nothing. It's actually the absence of something, and that does not exist in the universe. So 0 is a pseudo-number for that reason, but you can call it a number because it's on the line. It's in between the index and the reflection of the index. So the line has a very peculiar quality that it goes in two directions, one of which is anti-direction. It's anti-distance. So beginning at -1, you're going the wrong way. So the line is only useful for the positive numbers, and the negative numbers actually don't exist. If you pretend they exist, you'll confuse yourself to the point that you'll need complex numbers. So we don't use the negative numbers. Now, you know we do. The reason we do, and it took a long time after Euclid before the negative numbers could be accepted because they didn't seem to make any sense in the universe. In mathematics, mathematicians have trained themselves to treat negative numbers as if they really were something. But whatever they are, they're the invert of distance. And you will just simply file that away in your mind. Don't worry about it for the present moment. But you'll see in a moment why it's very important to realize that the index of linear spatial separation is only positive. Distance only goes out. Distance only goes out from 0. Distance does not go in the negative direction of 0. It only goes in the positive direction. That's how we get distances to stars. There's no such thing as a negative direction in the universe. And so the negative numbers are useless for the metric of space. And I've told you where we're going, so you know we are getting a solution. And you'll see what it is in just a moment. Now we have a line that makes perfect sense. It has a metric because it has an index of 1. So that 1 is an extremely peculiar number. It's an invention of the human mind, but it matches what the universe tells us about distance. You'll see in a moment that that's actually something of an illusion because we're finite beings. Get that through your head or you will ultimately confuse yourself when we reach the quantum limit and infinity. Now we have a line, and I proved that that is the diameter of a sphere. So now we have the sphere with a radius. There's one antipode which is negative, and the other antipode is positive. For distance, we only use the positive, but in the geometry of universal space, whenever you have a line, you have a sphere. So you take the radius, which is the linear spatial separation from the center to the edge. The linear spatial separation from the center to the edge on an unbounded sphere is infinite. So now we have a pseudospace. It is not a geometric space because it's infinite. If it's infinite, the metric is open. The metric is open because it's not closed. The metric of the line is open for linear spatial separation because it's not a closed line. So it goes to infinity. What I did was to discover what that means. You have to bound infinity, but when you do so, you have to make it rational so it's computable, which is impossible, and you also have to account for the remainder, which is infinite space beyond the edge. So we have two seemingly insurmountable problems. Let me show you now how you can use both of those problems as paradoxes that unite into a relationship. Infinity goes on forever. Okay, let's just say it does. It obviously does. The James Webb Telescope has given us conclusive proof, finally, that we're never going to find the edge. We'll never find the edge of the universe. It is infinite. That has been proved by astrophysical research. Now, the cosmological modelists don't accept that because they think they've already found the edge. I'll show you why that actually makes some sense. But for the time being, we have to put a limit to the universe. Happily, the cosmologists have already given us that limit. In the construction of a time-dependent universe on a linear metric, you can contract the universe to an imaginary point. That's called the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the contraction of universal space with everything that's in it, which is energy. It's the contraction of energy to an imaginary point. That is illogical. I'll show you. Actually, you have to be cautious in saying that that's illogical. It can be extrapolated with linear mathematics that the radius of the universe is that distance that the James Webb Telescope has penetrated. The James Webb Telescope has penetrated the 10 billion light-year limit, beyond which we're not going to be able to see much. The James Webb Telescope is the last of the great telescopes because it accomplished what we wanted to find out. In this context of bounding the infinite universe, you can do so on the radius. If you think you can compute the radius, which we think we can now, it's 14.7. It doesn't matter what the units are. I'm not attempting to validate or invalidate the cosmological framework that seems to support, because mostly it's a chimera. You can't really deduce much from that about what's in the universe. Although it's being tried, and Alexander Unziker thinks he has a handle on it, he'll never solve it until he listens to me. So that's the way it actually is. Now that we have a valid linear metric for the universe has a radius. The radius of the universe is 10. Beyond that, it's imaginary space. So that's the boundary. Well, we need a number for that boundary. Nobody's ever thought of doing this. I did, because it's forced by the dictates of the universe that you must do that. So I found the number that expresses that limit. It is a spherical number. It's infinity over 1. What that implies is a new number system of fractions. I discovered that, having used the work of John Horton Conway in his surreal binary number tree. He proves, unknowingly to himself, what I discovered. So John Horton Conway is my witness. After that, all you need is inversive geometry, which is a mathematic system for parameterizing the circle, which immediately translates to the sphere. Simply accept that. This has to be brief. We're coming up on a half an hour. So now we have an infinite space that encloses the finite universe. This is the beginning of the new mathematics, geometry, and physics. It begins with this insight that you have a bounding sphere and you need a number system for spherical space now because everything in the universe is spherical. Nothing is linear. You can treat linear mathematics the way you wish as a derivative number space. It certainly worked. We got space-time, but we also got hypercalculus, so that fails. It's too complex to be real. The universe is simple. I discovered its simplicity, and Alexander, we need to talk. I'm reaching out to Kurt Mungle, but Lex Friedman is not out of the question. You and I are going to meet, or something is violently wrong that you refuse to correct. It's now in your lap. That's your responsibility. That's why you're a presenter on YouTube. We now have an actual number for the edge of the universe that's infinity over 1. What that directly implies, according to inversive geometry, is that the center is no longer 0. Why? Because you have a fractional number system that does not have 0 in it. You have a number infinity over 1. I proved that that directly implies the number for the center. This is a mind blower, so get ready. The center of the universe is not 0. The center of the sphere is not 0. The 0 is inside the quantum. So what is the quantum? It's the number 1. So the interior of 1 is imaginary space to the proportion that outside the edge is imaginary. So now we have two imaginary spaces. The quantum that's inside the 1 and the infinity that's outside the infinity over 1. That infinity over 1 directly implies that the infinity is outside. That's what a fraction means. The number on top is outside. The number on the bottom is inside. And the number itself represents a surface. So infinity over 1 is the surface of the universe on the outside. 1 over infinity is the surface of the universe on the inside. These two numbers have a strict definition which you must master or you'll lose your mind. Infinity over 1 on the outside is proportional to the 1 over infinity on the inside, and the definition of those two numbers, which should blow your mind, but it's true, it can be proved. The number on the outside, the lazy 8, is the largest number. And it's defined specifically as the number that is so large that it can't be computed. It's imaginary. So you have an imaginary infinity on the outside and an imaginary infinity at the center. What is that center? It's the smallest number. And it's so small that it's imaginary, it cannot be computed. That's the quantum paradox. So now we have the shape of the quantum. And we also have the Planck limit. We have the index for this spherical space, as I just taught you how to do that. You need the metric for the space, or you can't compute it. Your spherical numbers are useless if you don't have a metric. But what are the numbers? The numbers are reciprocal whole fractions. And when I say whole, that's a new definition of whole, because it's a relationship on 1. The center of the number system is 1, not 0. There is no 0. So the center of the superior mathematical and geometric system is a new index. I can tell you the exact number for the radius of the quantum. That inner sphere is imaginary. So the radius of the quantum is an imaginary number in our mathematical space. So what is it the radius of? It's the radius of the quantum. And so the Planck length is that radius. The Planck length is the lowest number in linear space. Max Planck discovered that. The lowest number in linear space is a finite number. It's the Planck length. So you need the units. That's called the metric. What is it representing? What is the Planck length? Well, first of all, what nobody has realized is that the Planck length is imaginary. It has to be. We now have the number system for a finite universe that solves the quantum paradox and rationalizes infinity for the first time. That's all I have time for. That's all I have energy for. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm putting myself out as much as I dare right now. I'm going through a major overhaul. I have to collect myself. I have to know exactly where I stand emotionally. I wish to maintain my dignity as a rational man. A scientist is nothing if not a gentleman, a scholar, a diplomat. I'm getting no comments. I'm getting no feedback. I'm getting no distribution. Why do you think I'm doing this? Keep looking up and tune in again to Anagalactic. We'll have a production every day, no matter how desultory it is, because I have to maintain continuity. I learned something from each lecture I make, and I learned something during this lecture. I hope you did. I'm trying to do my best for the highest good, and I'm sorry that I have these emotions. You're either with me or you're against me.